The salt-crusted wood of the steering oar bites into Odysseus's calloused palms, but he does not let go. Ahead, through the shifting grey mist of the Ionian Sea, a flickering orange glow breaks the dark. It is the hearthfire of Ithaca. Home is so close he can smell the cedar smoke and the scent of rain on the olive groves. He can almost hear the lowing of the cattle in the high pastures. But behind him, in the shadows of the deck, his crew whispers. Their eyes are fixed not on the shore, but on the heavy, silver-corded bag of bullhide resting at his feet. Will the king's 10 years of iron discipline finally lead them to the sand? Or will the greed of his own men turn this homecoming into a grave of wind and water? The war for Troy was a memory written in scars and ash, a decade of steel clashing against bronze and the screams of dying heroes. For Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, the journey home had become a second war, fought not against Phrygian spears, but against the very gods and the churning belly of the wine-dark sea. They had survived the blinding of the Cyclops, but the cost had been the heavy shadow of Poseidon's wrath. When the black-hulled ships finally drifted to the floating island of Aeolia, the men were hollowed out, their spirits as frayed as their rigging. They had seen their brothers devoured by monsters and swallowed by the tides, leaving them as ghosts in their own bodies. Aeolus, the keeper of the winds, had shown them a kindness rare among the immortals. In the high, bronze-walled halls of his kingdom, surrounded by his 12 children, the god had hosted them with grace. They feasted until the memory of hunger faded, and the salt sting in their lungs was replaced by the warmth of wine. But the gift Aeolus bestowed upon their departure was the most dangerous treasure a mortal could carry, a bag fashioned from the hide of a 9-year-old ox bound tight with a cord of shimmering silver. Inside, the god had trapped the blustering north, the treacherous east, and the howling south. Only the gentle west wind was left free to blow them straight to Ithaca. Odysseus's plan was a testament to his legendary will. He would not trust the steering oar to any other man. He would stand at the helm, a statue of meat and bone, until the keel grated on the pebbles of his own kingdom. He knew the nature of his men. Their hearts were forged in the heat of battle, but cooled into the brittle iron of suspicion. They had bled for 10 years under the walls of Ilium, and they felt the world owed them more than just their lives. To tell them the truth, that the bag held the very storms of heaven, was to invite fear. To tell them it held nothing was to invite curiosity. He chose a middle path of silence, a commander's distance that felt to the crew like the arrogance of a king. For 9 days and 9 nights, he did not sleep. His eyes grew bloodshot, the whites turning to the color of rusted iron. His muscles cramped into knots of agony, his fingers locking around the wood until they were one with the ship. Yet he held the course. He watched the west wind fill the sails, a steady hand from a god, guiding them across the trackless waste. He was the bridge between the divine gift and the mortal destination, a singular point of vigilance that allowed for no weakness. His first mate, Eurylochus, watched him with a mixture of awe and growing resentment. Eurylochus was a man of the earth, who understood the weight of a sword, but not the weight of a god's favor. He saw the king's white-knuckled grip on the oar, and the way Odysseus's eyes never left the horizon. On the 8th night, as the moon hung like a silver sickle, Odysseus had touched the silver cord of the bag. He had whispered to himself, "The wind is a slave to the silent, but a master to the loud." Eurylochus, lurking in the shadows, heard only slave and master, and his eyes narrowed at the silver twine that glowed in the moonlight. Ithaca was no longer a dream. It was a visible line of black rock against the starlit sea. The fires of the shepherds were clear now, dancing on the cliffs of the island. Odysseus could see the shapes of the trees, the twisted silhouettes of the olives he planted with his own hands. His heart, heavy with 10 years of longing, finally faltered under the weight of his own triumph. He believed the battle was won. Believing the danger was behind him, his eyelids, heavy as leaden shields, finally dropped. His grip loosened. He collapsed against the steering oar and slept the sleep of the victorious. In that sleep, the mutiny began. It was not a mutiny of swords and shouting, but a quiet, creeping rot of the spirit, born from the fatigue of 1,000 miles. The crew gathered in the waist of the ship, their faces pale and ghostly in the pre-dawn light. They looked at the king, then at the bag. Why should he go home to a full treasury while we return with empty hands? Eurylochus whispered, his voice a hiss of salt and envy. The men nod, their discipline dissolving into the frantic hunger of the desperate. They do not see the shore. They see only the silver cord. Fingers tremble with the weight of their betrayal. The knot is tight, but greed is a sharp blade. They slice through the silver twine. The world ends in a scream. It is not the scream of a man, but the shriek of the sky being torn in two. The winds, the north, the east, and the south, erupt from the oxhide bag like 1,000 starving lions loosed from a cage. The west wind, their gentle brother, is swallowed in an instant. The ship does not just turn. It is seized by an invisible hand and hurled backward with the force of a divine catapult. Odysseus is thrown from his sleep by the sudden, sickening weightlessness of the deck falling away beneath him. He opens his eyes to see the fires of Ithaca, his home, his wife, his son, receding into the distance with a speed that defies the senses. They are a vanishing spark in a world of grey. He lunges for the bag, but it is empty, a limp and hollow skin. He looks at his men and sees only terrified children, their hands over their ears. He grabs the oar, but there is no steering in this madness. The winds are a physical force, hammering the breath from his lungs. He feels the Tantalus cruelty. The water was at his lips, and now the earth itself is being pulled away. The realization hits him harder than any wave. He has failed. Not because he was weak, but because he thought he could carry the burden of a god's gift alone. He considers, for one dark and freezing moment, casting himself into the sea. Better to drown in the sight of home than to live through the slow death of a second exile. But his hands grip the rail. He chooses to live, even as the storm drags them back toward the island of Aeolus. The storm does not tire until it has spat them back onto the shores of the Bronze Island. The silence that follows is heavier than the wind. Odysseus stands on the deck, his face aged a decade in a single night. He does not lash out at the crew, he simply looks at them, and they cannot meet his gaze. They are broken, not by the wind, but by the sight of their own reflection in the king's hollow eyes. They had seen home, and they had traded it for a bag of air. The shame is a weight that anchors them to the sand. He leads them back to the palace of Aeolus, but the bronze doors are cold. When Odysseus begs for a second chance, Aeolus looks at him with horror. "Begone from this island at once," the god thunders. "It is not permitted for me to help a man whom the gods so utterly detest. Your return is proof that the immortals have cursed you." Odysseus says nothing. He turns and walks back to the shore. The weight of divine rejection is a physical burden, a cloak of lead that makes every step an agony. He has been judged and found wanting by the heavens. The cost is absolute. There is no more west wind. The men take up the oars, but their arms are weak and their hearts are dead. They begin the long, agonizing row across a sea that no longer offers them a path. Odysseus sits at the stern, realizing that a leader who does not bridge the gap between his vision and the hearts of his men is a leader of ghosts. History remembers him for his cunning, the man who broke the walls of Troy. But here, he learned that the sharpest mind is useless if it sails on a sea of broken trust. Walk with us through the old stories of blood, bone, and fate. Subscribe to Saga Weaver, where the echoes of ancient warriors still ring, and where every impossible choice defines the destiny of kings and the souls of men.